pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel, and here I am with my first Friday reads outdoors in my new neighborhood. This is the barren, sandy park with the two crumbling benches, and because it's a cool day, it's so beautiful. I don't know what the temperature is, but it's normal people would not even be wearing shirt sleeves, they'd be wearing jackets, but for me, I'm just so comfortable. And it's been raining off and on all day, but it hasn't rained very much for the last couple hours, so I'm going to chance it and hope I can get through my Friday reads before it starts to rain again. Yeah, the backdrop isn't that beautiful, is it? You'll see people biking back and forth and walking back and forth, and that's about it. So I have lots of bookish news, so I'm not going to say much personally. It's been another great week, still settling in, and for both Kenji and I, it's an adjustment to live with a partner. So it hasn't been without incident, but nothing that we can't manage and talk through. Oh, one thing Kenji said, he watched one of my videos. He was actually in the other room playing his video games, and I was watching it on the big screen TV, because I can do that now in the new place. And he heard me give the name of the station, and he said, please don't mention the name of the station. He doesn't want stalkers coming to our door. So I guess that makes sense, so I will respect that. I won't mention the station where I live again. Alright, I finished a swack of books this week, finally. All three of the books were buddy reads. One was The Comforters by Muriel Spark. I really enjoyed it. 4 stars, didn't love it, had lots of flaws, but as Adam has convinced me, he got a lot more out of it and appreciated it and thought it was much better on a second read, so I will reread it. I studied this in college in the mid-1980s. Don't remember anything about it. As I was reading it the second time last month, I think there's a car accident in the middle, and I had a vague memory of that. But everything else I didn't remember, so. But as I said last week, these are the seeds of what Muriel Spark would go on to develop in her fiction that I just love. So, 4 stars. And I also finished the Barbara Pym biography, A Lot to Ask, A Life of Barbara Pym by Hazel Holt. And I am working on a separate joint review with Ange of Beyond the Pages. We buddy read it together. I loved it, 5 stars. As I said last week, I'm so smitten with Barbara Pym now, and I try to explain why in that review, and I won't take any time here. Summer Will Show by Sylvia Townsend Warner. This was a buddy read with Britta Bolt and Eric Carl Anderson, and the buddy read was fantastic. And I was the odd man out in that because of my move, by the end I was lagging a week or so behind them, but otherwise it was a fabulous buddy read. And ultimately the three of us kind of arrived at the same place, which we enjoyed the buddy read and we enjoyed a lot of the writing, but it's kind of I would say, I don't want to put words in their mouths, but for me it was a failure as a novel. If you like Henry James, and I loathe Henry James, you might like it, because her writing really is quite imitates his style, and it gave me a headache because Henry James is just awful. Why anybody reads Henry James, I don't know. The only Henry James novel, this is a digression, that he didn't revise in his new, just completely ridiculous style. Like his whole works he revised and revised. So there's a canonical edition, and he's amped up that horrible style, so it just gives you a headache to read 2 sentences. The only novel he didn't revise and isn't included in that final version, is The Bostonians, and that's the only Henry James novel I like. Anyway, I digress. Didn't like the Jamesian prose. There's also a Proustian feel to this, in that you fall so deep into the protagonist Sophia's consciousness that you kind of forget that there's a plot for pages, and then Sylvia Townsend Warner just kind of advances the plot, and you just kind of catch up. Oh, what happened? Oh, she went there, or oh, somebody died, or oh, because you just gone such a deep. Now, I don't mind the Proustian as much as the Jamesian, but that said, some of the best writing I've read this year is in this novel. So there's something else going on in this novel that I really appreciated. Just gorgeous writing, and I'm going to share maybe my favorite passage. But I guess before I do that, I should say a little bit about what it's about. Sophia Willoughby is an aristocratic English woman. Her husband has left her with her 2 kids because he's a philanderer. And then her 2 kids, this is very early, it's on the back cover, her 2 kids die of typhoid or something like that. And she kind of has a mental breakdown despite not really loving her children all that much. She's very selfish, very unlikable. No problem. That didn't turn me off. Then she decides she wants to go to Paris, track down her husband, and just get pregnant by him. She doesn't want anything else from him other than enough sex to get her pregnant so that she has something to live for. And it's wild. Written in 1936, set in 1848. So she happens to arrive in Paris on the eve of the 1848 revolutions. And some of the writing about the 1848 revolutions was really vivid and compelling, and other parts it's like she gets so deep in a Proustian way into her consciousness, and then you realize what the hell's going on around. The adjective that I kept using, and it must have been driving Eric and Britta crazy, was gauzy. There was something so gauzy about the narrative. By the time she arrives, Frederick has a Jewish mistress, and she is a professional storyteller, and she's been a performer and this and that. And Frederick is already on the outs with his mistress. Her name is Minna, so she's really the second main character. And basically they get into the 2 women end up getting into a relationship during the fallout from the 1848 revolution. That's all I'll say. But this excerpt is maybe the next night after the revolution, and she's spent a crazy, unforgettable night with Minna. Not sexual. There's nothing that's overtly sexual here, but eventually they do end up becoming a couple. It's pretty obvious. But at this point, they've just spent a night together talking and walking around and looking at the barricades and stuff. And Sophia goes back to her hotel. She has a relative. She keeps calling her great aunt, Leo Caddy, but there's no blood connection. I think it was her uncle's first wife's mother or her uncle's first wife's aunt. Like, no blood relation to her, but it's great aunt Leo Caddy. And she wants to go see this aunt because this is the 3rd revolution that Leo Caddy has lived through in her life. I must certainly improve on my bonnet, thought Sophia, stalking about the room in long-limbed nakedness, the London bonnet held out at arm's length. Great aunt Leo Caddy had attained her 3rd revolution. The least tribute one could pay would be a bonnet in the highest and latest fashion. Warming herself before the hearth, Sophia recollected how great aunt Leo Caddy had praised her for those long legs, how, coming into the nursery, she had insisted upon viewing them naked to make sure that there was no trace of rickets. In the nursery also there had been a blaze of logs, and the child had strutted to and fro, holding up her shift, pleased to be shocking the nursemaids, proud of her legs, so long and fine, and the narrow knee joints, which would be in time, so great aunt Leo Caddy said, one of her beauties. Leo Caddy had spoken praises in her flat voice, the nursemaids had clucked like hens, and the child had strutted up and down, lording it over that poultry yard. Now, once more, it was a pleasure to warm her legs at the fire, to be free and naked, and to hold that expensive bonnet in her hand, deciding that it would not do. Since she had freed herself of Frederick, nakedness was again a pleasure. Mrs. Frederick Willoughby, sharing a great bed with Mr. Frederick Willoughby, or hearing him splashing and crashing in his dressing room, had been as sly as a nymph, as disobliging as a virgin martyr, armoring herself in great starched dressing gowns, voluminous as clouds. She tossed the bonnet across the room and looked at the bed. I think that's my favorite passage in the book. I mean, there's a whole novel's worth of story in that paragraph, and that's an example of the kind of writing that would just knock me out of my chair. And then all this other stuff, Jamesian headaches and subterranean stream of consciousness, deep dives a la Proust. And I mean, I love Virginia Woolf, so it's not like I'm adjacent to the stream of consciousness, but it was just too much. It didn't work as a whole, and I'm so glad I read it. Apparently, Eric said in his wrap-up, and said to us on the Buddy Read channel, Eric's getting pretty good at Boxer, by the way. Apparently, among aficionados of Sylvia Townsend Warner, this is not the book to start with, so I might be tempted to read another one in due course. And this is a little bit of a one-off thing, but I read my very first Philip Roth anything, a short story, because the guys at Stripped Cover Lit were doing a discussion on it, and I saw that announced on their channel and found out that I could read that in the New Yorker for free online. I'll put the link in the show notes. So I read it. I've never read anything by Philip Roth, ever. I really liked it. I didn't love it, but I really liked it. It was a great story about the clash of identities of Jewish soldiers in World War II on a military training base in the States. Just at the end of the European war is finished, and it's May 1945, and there's a Jewish, what is he, major or something? I've forgotten the title. I'm not good with titles, but a higher up guy, major, and some privates, and the younger guy is Jewish, and he realizes his superior is Jewish, and there's this really intense relationship between them. That's all I'm going to say. Read the story. It was really good. So I read that, and I think one of these days Bruno and I are going to be buddy reading A Portnoy's Complaint. So those are the books and other stuff that I have finished. Just a couple comments about what's in progress. I finally got back to the Catherine Mansfield short stories, which had been put on hold for about a month. The Garden Party and Other Stories. The ebook that I'm reading on Scribd is really strange, so I actually thought I was reading the title story, The Garden Party, until I got to the end and realized, oh, no, this story is called At the Bay. It was a really, really good story. There's a couple things I didn't care for, didn't translate into the modern idiom for me, but so much of it was, 80% of it was just stunning. And here's my favorite passage. It's set on a summer colony, so a bunch of families, summer vacation. I don't understand. I couldn't quite understand that part of it. But anyway, it's in the summer, and the women and the kids all go down to the beach to bathe after the men go to work. So listen to this. This is just gorgeous. As the morning lengthened, whole parties appeared over the sand hills and came down on the beach to bathe. It was understood that at 11 o'clock the women and children of the summer colony had the sea to themselves. First the women undressed, pulled on their bathing dresses, and covered their heads in hideous caps like sponge bags. Then the children were unbuttoned. The beach was strewn with little heaps of clothes and shoes. The big summer hats, with stones on them to keep them from blowing away, looked like immense shells. It was strange that even the seas seemed to sound differently when all those leaping, laughing figures ran into the waves. Old Mrs. Fairfield, in a lilac cotton dress and a black hat tied under the chin, gathered her little brood and got them ready. The little trout boys whipped their shirts over their heads, and away the five sped, while their grandma sat with one hand in her knitting bag, ready to draw out the ball of wool when she was satisfied they were safely in. The firm, compact little girls were not half so brave as the tender, delicate-looking little boys. Pip and Rags, shivering, crouching down, slapping the water, never hesitated. But Isabel, who could swim 12 strokes, and Kezia, who could nearly swim 8, only followed on the strict understanding they were not to be splashed. As for Lottie, she didn't follow at all. She liked to be left to go in her own way, please. And that way was to sit down at the edge of the water, her legs straight, her knees pressed together, and to make vague motions with her arms, as if she expected to be wafted out to sea. But when a bigger wave than usual, an old whiskery one, came lolloping along in her direction, she scrambled to her feet, with a face of horror and flew up the beach again. I just love her writing. She really writes about children really well. Yeah, it was a really great story. I think it was one of my subscribers that commented when I mentioned her before that she was the only writer that Virginia Woolf expressed jealousy of. So, whoo. I picked Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas back up this week and read a lot more. I'm doing it as an audio text combo. I'm really enjoying it. And I didn't bring it with me, but the Michel de Kretzer novel. I can't even remember the title. Life Will Go On. I don't remember the title at all, but I had to put it aside because I was moving and trying to keep up with the buddy reads. So, thankfully, Britta Bowler has agreed to buddy read it. I only read 25 pages before I put it aside, so Britta and I are going to start buddy reading it next week, and I will finish it within the month of July. There's other books that I'm supposedly reading that I haven't picked up yet, so I'm not going to mention those. The only new book I've started this week is Grand Hotel by Vicky Baum. This is a buddy read with Ange of Beyond the Pages. We both love this book so much. I've read 2 chapters and just sucked us both in from page 1. It's about the Grand Hotel, the hotel in Berlin in the 1920s, I guess. And there's such a colorful cast of characters. It's written in a really cinematic style. It was made into a movie with Greta Garbo in about 1932. This was published in the late 1920s. And it's just riveting. So I'm going to read you a passage about the main character. I can't really decide yet who the main character is, but one of the main characters, his name is Kringeline, and he's a sad sack from the provinces. I don't think he's very old, 40 years old, in a loveless marriage back home, has just received a diagnosis of some terminal illness and has decided to cash in whatever the equivalent of RRSPs would be back in Weimar, Germany, and live like a rich man, free of his wife and free of everything in the remaining time, or for a month or whatever. He's got enough money to live high on the hog for a month, so he comes and stays at the Grand Hotel. He's of a lower class and really intimidated by everything going on at the hotel and in Berlin. And here is the scene of him coming back to the hotel his first night after going out carousing. And he arrives at 1 a.m. And this, I thought, was just a fabulous paragraph. Just before 1 o'clock, Herr Kringeline landed in the bar. He was tired, and he sank down at a small table and surveyed the world about him with watery eyes. To tell the truth, Kringeline was utterly tired out, but he had the obstinacy of children on their birthdays. He simply would not go to bed. Moreover, he felt that he was asleep already, for everything entered his brain like a confused and feverish dream, and the noise, the perpetual movement, the voices, and the music seemed at one moment quite close, and at the next moment very far away and entirely unreal. The world hummed most strangely about his ears, and everything combined to produce in him a mysterious state of intoxication. Once, when he was 10 years old, Kringeline had played truant from school. In a panic at the thought of a dictation lesson, he had gone out in the warm morning mist along the road to Michenau. Then he had left the road and lain down in the heat of the day, and slept with his head on a cushion of clover. Later he had gone into a grassy hollow by the river, and feasted on the raspberries that grew there in immense profusion. All his life he had never forgotten the buzzing of the great gnats that had fastened on his bare legs, and his red, juice-stained fingers as he pressed in among thorns and nettles to gather handful after handful of raspberries. He felt again, here in the bar of Berlin's most expensive hotel, the same intoxication, a sense of exuberant plenty, as well as of anxiety and alarm, the faint threat haunting the wicked joy of wrongdoing, the excitement of an escapade. It all came back to him as he sat there between 1 and 2 in the morning. The stinging gnats were there, too, in a sense. They had taken on the likeness of figures that tormented his brain, the brain of a bookkeeper who had kept accounts all his life long, and now could not stop. That is just gorgeous. So, really enjoying this one so far, and I would be shocked if that did not continue. I guess I will start one more book next week, and that is one that I kind of forgot about for a NetGalley proof. It's a novel that will be published at the end of July, Entangled Lives by Imran Omar, Pakistani American writer. Don't even know which language it was originally written in, so I haven't researched it that much. I'll tell you next time. But it's about a poor Pakistani boy that ends up getting mixed up with the Taliban. Should be interesting. So, yeah, I've had a great reading week, and you wouldn't believe how many motorcycles have gone by that will have edited out. So that's going to be the one bane of my existence. This must be a motorcycle gang area. I don't remember so many motorcycles back at the old place. But anyway, yeah, that's it. What are you up to, reading-wise or otherwise? Thanks for watching.